that the structure creates. It allows me the ability to be more spontaneous. It helps you become even stronger being who you are. Does that make sense, Tyler?
I wasn't expecting to talk this long.
Yeah, I know.
Welcome to GrovTalk. Her words were, what? GrovTalk is an interview series on all things growth, personal development, leadership, and how to grow your business. Stay tuned to hear from business owners, entrepreneurs, and people who have a story to tell.
Maybes will kill you.
Welcome to this episode of GrovTalk. I'm your host, Tyler Grover from GrovTech Machining. GrovTalk is the discussion of all things growth, from personal development growth to leadership growth and how to grow your business. On today's episode, we have Brian Canfield from the Pacific Northwest Aerospace Alliance. Brian, if you can, for context, could you introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your career, where you've been, what you've done, and where you are today?
Not a problem. So before I got into aerospace, I worked in the high-tech industry, worked for audio video companies. Some you've heard of, like Bose and Philips. Worked in distribution and ran the western third of the U.S. there. But also worked for companies that ended up not doing so well in the long term. Some of those were companies like Circuit City. And at that company and companies before, did some work in management. And one of the things I really enjoyed actually about working for some of those companies that had challenges is it was a great opportunity to see how business was done and how things were done well at certain companies. And at some of those companies, you learned things that you wouldn't want to do or replicate in business in the future. And that helped me start down a path of researching companies that had challenges. And I've found it very interesting to look at the lessons that companies that had challenges had and what you can do differently in business.
That's great. What led you to get into the aerospace industry? Have you always had a passion for the aerospace industry?
Yeah. As a kid, I remember, going to the book club and buying a book on fighter aircraft or different types of airplanes and helicopters. And when I was a kid I can remember making aircraft carriers and little planes out of paper and kind of entire dioramas with these different things, and watching the History Channel growing up and stuff like that. My grandfather was in World War II in Korea and had other family members in the service. And so I was always fascinated by them. And many years ago, I had a friend who ran a machine shop, and he asked me to come do sales and marketing. And the recession hit. And back in 2008, 9, 10, 11, a lot of American manufacturing had really dried up. And so when you're doing sales and marketing and there's not much of anything being made, you're looking around going, okay, who is making stuff right now? And at the time, Boeing was flourishing. Boeing had the 787 that was coming up to speed really quickly. And so as Boeing was continuing to expand, the aerospace market was there. And so as we were looking for new segments to go into, the company I was at had not pursued aerospace in many years, and not much at all. I said, hey, here's something that we should check out. And so that's really what started my journey into aerospace. And we were starting off making small little interior components. And over a couple of years, we were making much larger components and multi-year contracts. So that's what got me into it. And then it was really exciting because I lived near Payne Field up there. And so, going home every day, I'd see the big airplanes, and it was amazing to see the Boeing Everett factory, just how mammoth it was and all the amazing work that goes on there. And I had a friend who said, Boeing's really ramping up with the 787 project. You should check it out. And I did that, and it started off a 6-year journey at Boeing where I got to try many new things, different jobs and different experiences. And that's really kind of what led me to where I'm at today.
That's awesome. One of the things you pinpointed when you were talking about your background was you've spent a lot of time researching and learning leadership. How do you approach leadership?
It's a great question. It's a question I think so many of us struggle with, and it's a journey. When I think about leadership, I think of the great attributes of leaders that I've observed over the years. And I think, as a leader, you're always looking at those people around you that you respect and trying to figure out, hey, what can I incorporate that the things I respect in people. And so there are obviously a lot of different types of leadership strategies out there. Some are very forceful and sometimes pragmatic, and sometimes use really harsh methods, and can be very effective. You see these in football coaches sometimes, for instance. But the leadership approach that I try to take is, hey, we all go to work every day in a work setting, for instance. How can we make the most of this so people enjoy their time and be effective also in what we're doing from a business standpoint? But keeping the employees focused is a big piece of it, because if people are coming to work and they're having fun and they're enjoying what they're doing and they're enjoying the work that they do in their role, which is a big piece of leadership, making sure you're getting the right pieces or the right people into the right positions, rather. I think people naturally are having a great time. They want to do better, and they want to do things that are fun, and they want to advance the business. And so one of my leadership beliefs is, if you have your workforce optimized and you have them really enjoying the time there, that's going to come through the work and shine through all the way to the customer at the end. So that's one thing that I believe is really important from a leadership standpoint.
Yeah, we have a lot in common there with the whole servant leadership mentality. And I think Richard Bronson's the one that always says, if you take care of your people, they'll take care of your customers. Very cool. The weird thing with this last year with the pandemic, it was a big eye opener for people. And they say, I just read an article, they say a big exodus of people is coming. And so they're calling for a lot of people that are changing roles, responsibilities, jumping from companies, trying new things. I think people are taking advantage of the whole scenario, the feeling of right now of uncertainty. People got laid off and now they're trying to figure out what they want to do, maybe pursue something new. What are you doing for your teams to help people stay motivated and engaged in the business?
Right. I think there's a couple of key things. One is, I believe it's really important to make time for your team. Yes, we have work, we have things that we need to build, we have a job to do. If you forget about the part which is the team building aspect of your company, I think you're going to see higher attrition rates and your performance isn't going to be as great. There have been studies by McKinsey that indicate if you have a good, positive corporate culture, your work output, your productivity, your profitability will be 2x plus. And so one of the things that we do is we dedicate times, a few minutes in a staff meeting. It may be a whole dedicated day just to literally go out and have fun. Hey, how's the family? How's the kids? Hey, let's go do something. Let's go to the park. Let's go out to lunch. Let's trade stories. And that is really important, I believe, for the company morale with your employees. And when you have that, inevitably, many times when we're in these sessions, the conversation goes to work naturally. Hey, I've got this crazy idea. I got this great idea. Have you ever thought about this? Hey, we should try that. And you get those creative juices flowing, but it's definitely important to dedicate some of that time. I think for ourselves also, we're an events based business that serves the aerospace community. So obviously the last year and a half or so has been challenging for many organizations like ours. And so taking risks, I would say, is a part of it. And another part of it is trying things that are new. So traditionally, the aerospace industry, it's a fairly risk-averse industry. And a lot of folks that have been through these cycles, they say, okay, let's hunker down, let's retract, let's spend less money, let's use less resources. And our philosophy is, hey, let's just go the complete opposite direction of that. And I think you've seen that in business a lot in the last year and a half. Some companies will pull back, and other companies are saying, hey, there's a wide open market. No one's playing in it. Let's go for it. And let's do new things and let's expand. And so that's one of the things that we have done also is, hey, let's go try some new stuff. And pairing with that, I think for the employee morale is, your employees will often come to you because they're the ones doing the work, and they'll say, hey, there's a better way that we can do this, or here's a new idea. And I think one of the things that can have a negative impact on employee morale is when leaders say, no, we're going to do it my way. We're going to do it the way we've always done it. And sometimes those people that have their hands right in the middle of it they see things in ways that we don't sometimes as company leaders. So they have the best ideas in some cases. So I think one of the things that we're trying to do is, hey, let's listen to those ideas. Let's do a little research. And if it makes sense, let's do it. I'd say along with that also, some industries will spend a lot of time in evaluation and risk analysis. And by all means, those things need to happen in some cases. But there's a different business philosophy that says, hey, go and try it. See if it works. If it fails, make a course correction. If it works, or if it works partially, maybe you need to iterate it. But the speed of business and the speed of going to market with something sometimes can surprise your customers, can surprise your competition, and have some positive results. But I think those employees, when they're able to have some freedom and stretch their wings, if you will, and try some new things, and you give the thumbs up, especially when it works, everyone's happy.
Yeah, I'm very much that second type of leader, the follow your gut. At the start of the pandemic, I had never really engaged in digital marketing, and now I'm doing SEO audits, networking over Zoom on a global level, not just a national level, and attacking our online strategies. So definitely follow your gut, and if you fail fast and course correct, like you said. With all the turmoil and everything in the news and the pandemic, it's been hard to stay positive. What did you lean on to get through the pandemic?
Right. Well, it's a very fascinating topic. I feel like I could do a series of Grow Talks on this very topic alone. We live in a very unique time, a very kind of a strange world, really, in my opinion. We have so many ideas that are pushed our direction via the media and via other people, and ideas, different things out there that are telling us how to think and what we should think. And it's rather interesting because this pandemic really affected a lot of people differently on an emotional level. And, I don't know if some of it was scare tactics by the media or whatnot, but I think a lot of people really had a lot of negative emotions around the pandemic, feelings of loneliness and despair and feeling helpless. And some people's jobs and livelihoods and their schedules were all impacted severely by it. And I think as people, we have a choice every day, every hour, every minute. When we're faced with different circumstances, we can decide how we want to feel and what our response is to that given circumstance. And so for myself, I get accused by all kinds of people that I know of being overly positive. And, this pandemic, I think, showcased the importance of positive thinking and the power of positive thinking, because I believe that from a leader standpoint, especially, the tone that you set is the tone that your team's going to follow. And if you're negative, if you're feeling helpless, that's going to get amplified downstream through your employees. On the opposite, the approach that we took is a very positive approach. And yes, we can't go do in-person events. That's really challenging, being that that's one of our prime functions. So how do you pivot? How do you do something different? And not only that, but how do you get out there on the front edge and actually lead in that space? A lot of folks in our peer group, they had a lot of challenges, and some of the organizations downsized tremendously. We did not. And we took an approach of, hey, not only how can we go embrace this change, but how can we go do it better than anyone else? Or how can at least we try to do it better than anyone else? And we expanded the number of events we did. We expanded the types of events we did. We increased our webinars. We thought, well, gosh, if people can't go to aerospace manufacturing companies, why don't we bring the companies to them and do these virtual factory tours? We created a lot of new things. I believe the ultimate expression of this was with our annual conference. We put on the largest aerospace manufacturing conference in the Pacific Northwest, and this was our 20th anniversary. And we were expecting originally, fireworks and confetti and a flyby or something like that. And unfortunately, we couldn't do any of that because of the restrictions of COVID. So we said, well, there's this virtual idea and do a virtual conference. And there were a lot of platforms to choose from. And we could have chosen a very basic, low cost, would have gotten the job done. But we said, no, this is our 20th anniversary and let's go do something special. Let's make this the best P&A virtual conference, not only that we've ever done, but hopefully the best one out there. And we combined 4 different technologies that at that time nobody had combined in a virtual conference, to the best of my knowledge. And we this very interesting virtual conference with virtual rooms and spaces and networking opportunities. And we had executives at large, very large, in some cases, tech companies around the world scratching their head, wondering how a small team of people pulled this off. And so part of it's that spirit of we can do, and let's go do this together.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that event. Go big or go home, right? That was a great event. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, and it is good to be the energy that you want to see in your businesses and in your homes. So, so with the pandemic, have you learned any new skills? Did you take the time to learn anything new or try anything new?
Yeah, we learned all kinds of new stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it was, well, as an events company, how do you pivot from doing in-person events to virtual? And we figured that out. Mm-hmm. But the other thing we had to look at was, what is the ROI of our activities? So one of the things we realized in short order, if we weren't doing in-person events, that's a big hit to our revenue. And part of that was due to all the downward pressure we were seeing from literally all over the world of people doing free virtual events. I don't know if you remember that, the first half of 2020, there were large conferences, small conferences, events, they were all free. Everything was virtual and everything was free.
Yeah.
And so one of the calculated risks that we had to examine and try to account for was, well, how as a nonprofit organization are we going to continue to create revenue when we're doing it for free? And so we had to have a total mind shift there of how we had done things for 20 plus years and figure out, okay, can we do free events and how long can we do them for? And we went from this sustainability model more to a complete customer focus model. And so we increased these number of free events and we brought in speakers and specialists. And it really went from about building and creating this community of resources to how do we just simply give back and help the industry right now. And that was a big shift for us. And so it was tricky. The first, 3 or 4 weeks of the pandemic, we weren't sure how we were going to do it and what was it going to look like.
Yeah.
And then within a month or two in, we started to realize, okay, this is helpful information. And we were counting on, as we gave back to the industry and remained relevant, highly relevant, that when it was over, that people would come back and want to do events in person again. And we just had our first event yesterday and we saw just that. So it really worked and it paid off.
That's great. With the embracing of change in the marketplace, do you have any predictions on how business is going to be dealt in the future? And are you guys watching any kind of emerging technologies or anything innovative that you see out on the marketplace that you guys are going to try, give a shot?
It's a great question. And I've heard you ask this question before in some of your growth talks. I think it's an extremely relevant one. It's one that I think all corporate leaders should be considering right now. I think it's very important. Many companies have sent a lot of their workforce remotely. And there are questions, of course, of how many do we bring back? How many days a week should they be back in person? Should we continue doing things virtually, or should we migrate back to all in person? And I think every industry, every sector is probably going to be somewhat different. Obviously, you can't build an airplane from your desk at your home, but you may be able to engineer an airplane from your desk at home. And so for us, although I believe some of this technology will stick, what I believe is that as human beings, we're all very, very relational. And we all have different philosophies in this last 15 months with COVID. But I think one of the universals that I've heard is that people want to get back to visiting their friends, visiting their family, playing a game of pool together, or sharing a beverage in the evening or something like that. And so myself personally, I'm not necessarily reflective of P&A as a whole, but my personal belief is that more people than not will want to get back together in person. And some people have said they work more efficiently at home. Some people have said, man, I really miss being able to walk, 20 feet down the aisle there and talking to my buddy Jim and bouncing an idea off of him real time. Yeah. And so my personal prediction is that things will swing. And although some of this technology is here to stay, I believe that we will probably return more to what things were like previously in most sectors. Tech, that may not return as much, but.
Yeah, I think the banking industry too, they've been doing a lot of discussion about getting rid of their offices and having a lot of their workforce work remote. Sure. For us being a manufacturer, we just find there's a big delay with remote working. It's taking longer to get customers answers, and the communication is not as streamlined as we would like. For business development, I definitely believe that in person, you just can't beat, building a rapport with people in person. So I definitely look forward to being back in person. I believe you have an event coming up soon. What is it, the Summer Bash or Summer?
Summerfest. Yep.
Summerfest.
July 8th in Seattle. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm going to try and make it up for that one.
Cool. Excellent.
So, So let's get personal. Here's a good question, and if you can take a second, what life experience has most shaped who you are today?
Oh boy! Wow, that's a great question. I think I'll go back in the Wayback Machine. So I was probably about 19 years old or thereabouts, and I was doing sales at Circuit City. And I met this fellow, and at first I wasn't quite sure what I was taking in when I met this guy. He was just so positive and so friendly, and it almost seemed a little over the top at first, and which actually made me curious about this fellow. And similar to, I know Jay mentioned, he had mentors that were much older when he was younger. This was a similar type of instance. Where this fellow ran a region for an industry-leading company, and he was visiting in our retail store, and he would do that every several months. And so I always looked forward to when he showed up, and we got to know each other, and he basically became my first business mentor. And he co-authored a book with Jeff Keller. His name was John Lisicich, and the book was The Power of Positive Thinking. And I'm sure you can find that, I would imagine, on Amazon or somewhere on the internet. And so as he began to mentor me, he started to share famous quotes, I think Chuck Swindoll, 90% of, what happens to you is your attitude, and 10% is the actual act. I don't remember the exact phrasing, but that your attitude had a tremendous impact on your life outlook and your ability to actually make achievements. And it was a very interesting concept because I had never heard these concepts, and certainly not the way that he described them. And so he was my mentor into business, but also really into kind of a philosophy of how you live, and being positive and looking for the positive outlook on things, and the belief that you can do those things. I love famous quotes, and some of them are real life quotes, and some of them are fictional from movies. I love movies. And one of them was in Cars 3, and Cruise is talking to Lightning, and Cruise says, how did you know you could do it? How did you know you could win these races? And Lightning's response was, well, I just never thought I couldn't. and
That's so true.
So there's something there about confidence, but there's also something there, I think, about just the belief that you can go out there and do great things.
Yep, definitely. How have you approached your personal development?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I would say it's fairly multifaceted. When I met John when I was really young, it was the first mentor I'd had. I'd had a couple other people that kind of mentored a little bit, but not to the same level. And one of the things I recognized there was the incredible value that having good mentors can have. And over the years, I've been very blessed,
Mhm.
maybe lucky, depending on how you look at it, of having some great, great mentors in my life. And some of them have been directly within the industries I've worked, at companies I've been in, that there were folks that were higher up in levels of management. And some of them are just people I've met in everyday life through friends or family or different connections. And it's interesting because I think when we're really young, we look at elders and we kind of scratch our heads, and we hear all these sayings about the wisdom and all this stuff, but we don't really quite understand it. But I was fortunate at a fairly young age to realize there's incredible wisdom in mentors, especially folks that are older. So the development, for me, one big part of it is that seeking out those mentors constantly, keeping your head on a swivel. Hey, wow, who are the people that are out there that are the movers and shakers, and also are willing to take someone under their wing a little bit and teach them some things? So that's one facet. Another is different development programs. And this takes so many forms. I know you've had Jay Schmidt, who teaches leadership, I believe, is at WSU there in Vancouver,
Yep.
has a great class. And, they can be structured in a classroom setting. Nowadays, through YouTube and free online classes at many universities, you can go learn all types of leadership models. There are paid leadership models and different classes out there too. So you can take it on personal development or the technical side of things. If you're an engineer, if you're a machinist, there are all different types of classes that you can take to tune up your skills basically to the next level. So I think it's a combination of the technical side of things and then the leadership side of things out there. And then along with that, there are other adjacent facets, things like coaching or other different types of programs, certification programs, where it's a very specific, go get your PMP. If you've not done project management, I heard on another GrovTalk, sales is something they should be teaching in high school. And I agree with that. Project management, I think, is a really important thing also, because almost anything that we do, there is some aspect of project management. So go take some classes in project management. And then I think finally, finding the community, finding people, like where you're at here today on GrovTalk, find people that are passionate about personal development and leadership, and become friends with some of those folks. I don't remember how the saying goes exactly, but like the people you associate with are the types of people that you will become essentially. If you want to become a great leader, go find some great leaders. If you want to become a great manager, go find some people that have great management skills. And that network not only can teach you things, but along the way, you're going to find that you need to get connected to certain people for certain different functions to develop yourself further. That network is going to be able to point you and connect you to those people.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you audit your inner circle, you need to make sure that it's filled with people who inspire you. It's very important. Have you ever been stuck in a rut and needed to climb out of it? And how did you navigate out of that place in your life?
Sure. Certainly. I think as human beings, we all will find ourselves in a rut at some point. Maybe it's something with a family member, maybe someone close to you passes away, maybe you get into an addiction, or maybe you just have a string of bad events that impact you. And I think it's really easy for us when we fall into those places to kind of really shut out the rest of the world, and we become so introspective on what we're dealing with and the challenge ahead of us. And quite often, frankly, it can be overwhelming. And, so for some people that will manifest itself in different ways. Maybe it's anger, maybe it's depression, or something else. And so I think one of the first things to recognize is that you're in a rut. And for some people, they'll be in a state of denial, or they'll even be disinterested, that they're in a rut. And so I think the first step to that is recognizing that. And then secondly is, how do you get yourself lodged out of this rut? And, I think it's really challenging for us in leadership roles, especially unless we've built this network of mentors that we've not only claimed as mentors, but have given permission for accountability. we don't necessarily have a lot of peers that we can just, hey, bounce ideas off of necessarily. And so as leaders, I think we have to take an extra proactive step, and for everyone really, taking a proactive step to reaching out to someone and saying, hey, I need some help here. And that takes a lot of humility in certain circumstances to do that. But I think it's really important. And I think the other aspect is back to that positive thinking. And I think it's like a practice, like they talk about practicing medicine, right? You don't necessarily ever get there. You're always learning and perfecting and getting better. And I think positive thinking is the same way, in that you build muscle memory as you become more positive, and you're constantly being positive. And so if you get into one of these ruts, I think it's much easier to pull out and get back into positive thinking than if you're not. And so for some folks, it's going to be envisioning something, a goal that they have, or where they want to be in life. And maybe it's just, I don't want to be in a rut anymore. Mm-hmm. And doing what it takes between positive thinking and asking for help to get out of that.
Definitely. That was a great answer. So knowing what you know now, living your life, speaking from experiences, would you approach your personal development any different? For me, I think it would be, getting out from, or getting, separating myself from my ego. For me, I think when I was young in my career, I thought I was always right, and I didn't really listen. I think Jay actually spoke about it when he gave us some advice on his GrovTalk episode, where it was listen to understand. I think at an early age, it's a little bit difficult because you always think you're right. But I think it's, what's that saying? You're never too old to learn, and you're never too young to teach. I think there's a big give and take there, where you can learn from anybody that you come in contact with. So being open to that. I wish I would be more open at an earlier age like I am now. So
and Tyler, I think you're right. I think everyone goes through a different maturation process. And I don't know if there's anything that you can do to accelerate that. But definitely there seems to be some type of correlation there, I think, between the ego state and getting past that. When it's not all about you, I think a lot of things happen. One, I think your leadership likelihood or your leadership attractiveness goes up because other people see that and they go, oh, okay, this guy, he's a servant leader. He wants what's best for me, not what's best for him. And I think that's a big component. And I think you're right. When you are in that ego state, you don't necessarily, you're not quite as open maybe to all the different people because you don't recognize them necessarily as an authority. And so I think, on my journey, I took in the knowledge that I could and align myself with mentors that appeared good to me when I was younger. But I would say for the folks maybe that are in that younger phase of their career, is to try to open your mind to the people that are around you. Unfortunately, as I've gotten older, some of those people that were around me when I was younger are no longer there. And they've passed away, they've gotten older. So I can't go to them, maybe even certain family members, people that I respect. They're just not there anymore. I'd say another thing that you can do is, if you have an area of expertise in your career field or specifically within your leadership interests, to seek out who are the ultimate authorities in these particular areas. And that's one thing I wish I would have done when I was younger. And even maybe just famous people I would have enjoyed meeting or learning more about when they were still here. As we get older, some of those folks aren't around anymore. So I would say that's definitely something. The other thing I think where a lot of people get hung up is we may not exactly know what we want to do when we grow up. And I think I'm still dealing with that a little bit, Mm-hmm. So it's trying to figure out what you want to be, what's the end game, And I think sometimes when we're younger in our career, we're kind of chasing things that are interesting and attractive in the moment, but they may not be what we're all about in our end game for our career. And so whatever you can do to accelerate getting there, then you can come to realize, okay, who are the people that I want to learn from? And being able to do that earlier, I think can allow you to have more progress on that ultimate journey of what you're trying to do with your career or with your life.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of leads into the whole goal setting. Are you actively setting yearly goals, personal, business?
Oh yeah.
How do you set those goals, and how do you keep track of your goals?
I think there's lots of different ways. And sometimes it's writing them down. Sometimes it's creating a document or an infographic. For myself, they often will look like some type of report or some type of PowerPoint. Here are some of the big things that I want to accomplish in the next year. Say for our P&A where I work, we're expanding right now, and so we're creating goals that are fairly significant. And so, the next year, what do they look like? What do they look like 5 or 10 years down the road? And sometimes that path can be very murky, as we just saw with COVID-19. But something to shoot for. And I think what's really important, once the goals are written down, once you've really wrapped your head around what they are, you need to talk to some people and share what your goals are. And I think one of the big benefits there is some accountability. So in your workplace, maybe it's your manager or somebody in your management team. Maybe it's your board of directors. Maybe it's your peers within your work organization, or even the folks that work for you. And I think one of the challenges in many organizations is the employees don't really necessarily understand what the management wants to do and where they want to take the organization. And so to be able to share this, hey, I want our company to grow 5-fold in the next 3 years, or I want to increase the number of conferences we're doing, whatever those things are, it helps them articulate and point their resources to align with those goals that you're establishing. So I think that's one thing.
Yeah. It's not as easy as just having a clear vision. I think the first half of it is you have to establish that clear vision on what you want. Once you have that vision established for your life, do you have any tips to execute on that?
Yeah, and I'd say it somewhat depends on what it looks like. If it's in life, if it's in the workplace. I've done a lot of fun things over the years and helped run seafair events and all kinds of different activities. And I think one of the big things is once you have that clear vision, you're going out there and you're storytelling and you're sharing what that vision is. And that's really interesting, because when you start that process, you may not know how you're going to get there. You may have some ideas. But even if it seems like an unrealistic goal, which is one of the things I really enjoy, is you paint that picture and you start telling people about it. And what I've noticed when I've done this in the past is then people get excited about it. And you may not have even figured out how you're going to get there yet, but you start talking about it. And then what you find is you get some critical mass and you get some momentum, where it's not just you driving toward this goal, but it's your customer, it's your team. And before all you know it, you have people, oh, can I help with that? Oh, can I go tell someone about that? And the word starts to spread. And it's almost like it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense. And there's a lot of hard work along the way.
You're starting with the end in mind. And I feel like what you're saying kind of goes hand in hand with like the law of attraction. I don't know if you're a believer in the law of attraction, but I feel like there's a lot of weight to it. The world works in mysterious ways. So it kind of makes sense, what you think about, what you talk about, what you discuss or obsess about, eventually you could work your way towards it.
Sure. Yeah, it's fascinating, because once you start doing that and you start believing it, at 9:30 last night, I had some idea that popped in my head for a work activity. I sent someone a text message. That the ideas just start coming to you. The other part of it, I think, that's really important is a visualization of how you get there. And this is something that some people inherently may have the skills and they've learned this over time. Other people may need to go practice this a little bit. And that, once again, comes often in the form of project management or practicing taking an idea or a project or program from concept to completion, or cradle to grave, or there's many analogies for that. But one of the things I believe is really important is taking some time to visualize, okay, this is this audacious goal that I have. What are the steps that I need to take over the next 12 or 15 months to go make that a reality? You know, we had this virtual conference and all this new technology. We had never used any of it before, let alone combining like 4 very different technologies into one platform. And so, you know, as a team and as an individual, sitting down and thinking, gosh, how do I get this? What's the next step I need to do before I can do the next step? And kind of sequencing those things out in your mind, and just taking time to sit down and visualizing, okay, I need to do this. I need to contact this person. I need to set this up. I need to go arrange this. I need to clear this with this person. I need to get this approved. And trying to figure out, okay, what's the order? What are the steps that I need to do, and how do I get there? And there's some folks that are very gifted at that. But for those that aren't, it's a great skill to have, because you'll use it in every aspect of business. You'll use it when you're planning your vacation or your wedding or your next rock garden or whatever you're creating in life. So,
yeah, that's a good one. Have you heard of the reference BHAG? Big, hairy,
audacious goal.
Yeah.
Yep.
I always love when people reference that, just because I think it sounds funny.
Well, and it's, you know, tying it back to business, it's very fascinating. You know, what I was saying earlier on today is, you know, you can do the status quo or you can really go out there. And one of the aspects I believe is really important in business is really understanding your customer. And, you know, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of companies over the years focus on aspects of business that had nothing to do with the customer. You know, they want to go invent in technology, or they're focused on some aspect of shareholder value, or these different things, and they take their eyes so far off the customer. And so I think we don't do that enough in any industry, and I think some folks are really good at it, but I think we can always be better. It's this idea of continuous improvement, and it's not only, hey, what does the customer want, but how can I do this better than anyone in the world or in the industry or the region, whatever it may be. And when you connect those two together, I think that's where magic really starts to happen. And I really enjoy Simon Sinek. I'm sure many of you have heard of Simon. He talks about the finite versus the infinite thinking. And I think when the infinite thinking model is basically, what is my mission and how can I do that to the very best? And you keep an eye on your customers, or your competition rather, and you look at what they're doing, but you're not trying to beat them or copy them or something like that. It's just, how do I do this better and better and better each time? But it has to be connected with what the customer is seeking. And I think if you figure out that recipe and keep on that, that's typically something that's going to be very successful in business.
Definitely. What stands between you and where you want to go in life?
Ooh, that's
That's a
good question. You know, for myself, I think it's often, I wish there were about like 7 or 8 more of me to pursue all of my interests and passions and so on. And so one of the challenges that I think a lot of leaders have is around 2 things: delegation and being very particular or perfectionistic in their work. And it's a double-edged sword, because in so many businesses, especially around precision businesses, you know, if you're turning a Swiss part and you're off by, 50 thou, that part may not work with its mating part. And such in business, I think a lot of leaders, they have such a clear vision of what they want to see, that they want all the pieces to line exactly with this vision that they have. And so when you're growing and you're accelerating, one of the things that that I'm practicing, and I think other perfectionists are practicing, is how do you let go a little bit, and how can you delegate a lot? And that delegate piece is so key, because often I think leaders think, well, I can do it myself faster. And that works for a little bit. But when you start to scale up significantly, you can't be doing that across all these different expanded tasks that need to happen. So I think it's really critical that you have the right people in place, and you have really good training that you do with these people to get them to the highest level of ability, and then you hand it off. And that's something that it's something that I'm practicing. I'll continue to practice. I think the other thing for me is I just see opportunities everywhere in business. Everywhere I look, I just see opportunities. And a lot of people see challenges, and I just think, oh wow, that you could expand that fourfold in just a couple of months doing this and that. And so it's really bringing on other talent, bringing on the right talent that have the right attitude and mix well with your culture, but also your business and ideology philosophies on growth, for instance.
Yeah, I feel like being drowning in opportunities is a negative thing that I see myself as well. I see opportunities in industries. For us being a manufacturer, there are so many emerging markets just continuously popping up out of the woodworks, and it's hard not to just go heavy and jump on all these startup companies that are coming out and seeing what we can do to help out. So let's talk about failure. So tell us about failures and why they're important.
Yes. Failure, it's a very interesting topic, and one of my favorite quotes I'll share here in just a moment. But I think failures are actually, and not only I'll group failures together with challenges, because you can have a challenge and you can overcome a challenge, or you can have a challenge and it doesn't go so well, and you can call that a failure. Nelson Mandela has got one of my favorite quotes of all time, and that is, I never lose. I either win or learn. And so, for myself, I don't really associate with failures. I look at, hey, there's a challenge and maybe it didn't go so well, but now we learned something that we can do here in the future. And what's really important to me about challenges and failures is you learn so much more typically than any other time. If you're doing great, I think about the aerospace industry up through 2018, we had 12 or 15 straight good years, right? Mm-hmm. And most companies grew, and the revenues went up, and they expanded their business, which were all great things. But they had to manage, okay, how do I deal with more, in and out parts and things like that? When we have events like COVID or the recession, or some other related catastrophic event, we have to stop and we have to really sit down and think. And some companies through COVID had record profit years last year in 2020 in the aerospace manufacturing industry. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people say, Brian, that can't be right. And I said, oh, you'd be amazed at how many companies did. And people say, mm-hmm. How did they do that? Well, they learned a lot, and they learned very quickly, and they applied what they learned the next day or the next week and did that all year long. Yeah. And then there were companies that had some big challenges, and they didn't do so well financially. And there may have been other factors there, but one of them may have been maybe they didn't learn and pivot and adapt quick enough. It's a complex issue, but I think it's really important that you keep that in mind. That when you're going through a challenge, we just went through a good challenge for 18 months with COVID, and as most companies did, we learned a lot. And it also gave us the time to focus on how we build our infrastructure for the next 18 months ahead of us. And I think a lot of successful companies did that as well. So, when we come up to these things, I saw someone do a Live Long and Prosper in a recent GrovTalk. I like to reference the Kobayashi Maru. If you're a Star Trek 2 fan from long ago, you'll remember that reference. But these no-win scenarios, we've faced them in manufacturing many times in aerospace and with economic cycles. And so we have to figure out, is there such thing as a Kobayashi Maru or a no-win scenario? And if you look at it, that you're going to navigate through it, I think that's going to give you a much greater capability of success than, oh gosh, how do we deal with this? And if you're in panic mode. The other thing that happens that's really fascinating in business when it comes to failures is the lessons learned and how you can redundantly apply them over time. So I can remember when I worked at my machine shop and we went through the Great Recession, and there was no aerospace manufacturing. And the owner of our company was buying up CNCs like they're going out of business. And at first I thought, what is he doing? No one's making anything. Cash flow is really not good right now. Why is he buying these CNCs up left and right? Well, he was getting them for 30 cents on the dollar, and he was expanding his capability statement significantly. And after the recession, it opened doors to all kinds of new and different types of business than the company previously had. So the point here is, failures are great. They're like those badges you get on your uniform. And what they do for you is next time you go into a scenario, you now have this wisdom from hopefully you pivoting and doing things good. So the next time, a major challenge comes around, you can say, been there, done that. I know the playbook. Mm-hmm. And I remember back in the recession, scratching my head thinking, why does the owner of the company, he's just so calm and cool and collected, and he's buying up CNCs while everyone else was kind of in a frenzy trying to figure out how to keep the lights on. And for him, he'd been through it before. He had that experience of probably having gone through a challenge like that in the past. Mm-hmm. Those failures you learn from, and you can use them in the future.
Yeah, I think I've embraced failures a lot in just my career, early on in my career, and taking on new challenges. But as I coach more up and coming business professionals, there is such a fear around failing. Why do you think that is? Why do you think so many people have an issue facing their fear of failure?
It's probably a combination of different things. I think a lot of folks, so I do professional coaching and for folks out there, and one of the things that we talk about are what are the things that hold you back, and one of those is this fear out there of performance. And sometimes it can be very self-focused, and sometimes it can be even completely subconscious, that you're so focused on how well you're going to do, and you're worried about what other people are going to think about you if you fail. And sometimes that stems from things that happen in our childhood, or a past work role. Maybe we had a manager come down on us really hard for something. And sometimes it can be from lack of experience of success, or in some cases, even the fear of success. It's really interesting how some of these things play out with folks. And maybe there are economic conditions, oh gosh, if this doesn't go well and I lose my job, I'm going to have a problem at home, or I lose the house, or whatever it might be. And so I think, once again, as you spend a lot of time with mentors, or if you have a business coach, or if you have the GM or the owner of the company, you can go and talk with them regularly, bounce those things off them, and just tell them even straight up, gosh, I'm kind of scared what's going to happen if this doesn't work out, And in your mind, in our minds, we make up stories often. Oh, maybe I'm going to get fired. Oh, I might have to lay off half my workforce. The company could go out of business. What if I make the wrong decision and our competition takes advantage and flies right past us? And we bring up these narratives, and sometimes they're very nonsensical. And so, if you've got someone that you can bounce that off of and say, gosh, I'm really worried that, I could do this, and we might have to lay off half the workforce. And the owner might say, we got reserves. We've got good reserves. There's no risk here. Let's go roll the dice and see what happens. And the other thing is, you just may not know. You may have a great idea, and it might just work out wonderful.
Mm-hmm. The whole psych yourself out before you even get started. Yeah. Can you think of any interesting times in your life where you've had to conquer your fears? Any funny times? Any things that you've done? Are you an adventurous person? Not jump out of a plane or anything like that?
Yeah, gosh, yeah, there's quite a few.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm a fairly adventurous person, and yeah, in my own personal life, I've set a lot of goals, mountain climbing or all kinds
Mhm.
of stuff. In I'll relate it back to the business world. It's often, especially in this last couple of years, that we have all either taken or not taken calculated risks. Um, I'll cite our conference that we did. This thing was very technically complex, and we had never done these things before. And the workload was fairly significant to try to pull it all together.
Mhm.
And we weren't sure how many people were going to show up. We weren't sure if people would pay the registration fee. We weren't sure if sponsors. I mean, the aerospace industry didn't have much money. We weren't sure we were going to get any sponsors. We had these virtual exhibit booths, which was really kind of way out there. I'd
had
never
one.
seen anything like that before.
Mhm.
And we thought, are people even going to want to do this? Are they going to find it interesting? Are they going to be willing to pay? Are they going to get leads? Are companies going to make connections at this conference? Will all the technology work? And I don't know if we've shared this. We actually had a power outage at the facility that we were at, and it felt like being in a nuclear power plant that had just shut down, because we were surrounded by banks of computers and all kinds of tech equipment and green screens and lights and stuff. And we just thought, wow, we just lost power in a live conference, and we got it back up and running. And so there were a lot of risks there. And yeah, the whole thing was kind of scary. And we really didn't know how it was going to go. And thankfully, we guessed right on a lot of stuff, from the content to this virtual airport that we created to, all the different topics and the features. And it's funny, and maybe one of the most talked about things of the conference was we had this ambient sound in the background. It sounded like you're in an airport with kind of people walking around and loudspeakers going. And when we were doing our kind of beta testing, about 50% of the people said, I don't really like this. It's kind of annoying and loud and a little repetitive. And how am I going to hear the speakers? And we rolled the dice and we went with it. And we've actually, I think, received more compliments on that than any other aspect of the conference. Kind of humorous. So a lot of it is, like you said earlier, this going with your gut thing. It's really interesting in our industry in particular, because we live in an industry that's measured in 10,000s, and so many people are very calculated in our industry in particular. But what I have found is you can sit and calculate, you can sit and think, and you can discuss, and you can talk through, and you can just mull things over to pieces at once. You're expending a lot of time and energy doing that. But at the end, I think in so many aspects of business, go with your gut. It'll save you a lot of time and money. And it's probably right more times than even after you sit down and do the math on paper.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. So this has been a great episode, and I appreciate you joining me here. I got one more question, but how can people get a hold of you?
Oh, sure. There's lots of ways. The easiest is going to our website, pnaa.net. You can click on our team there. You'll find my contact information. My email is bcanfield@pnaa.net, and the phone number is there on the website as well. So that's going to be the easiest way. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can do that as well. Just look up my name. I think it's BL Canfield on LinkedIn. But just search Brian Canfield, and I'm the one at PNAA.
Perfect. And I'll put a link in the video description as well. So the last question is, if you knew you could never fail at anything, what would you try?
One thing. That's the problem. There's a couple of things that are coming to mind.
Should we make it two things?
Sure, we can make it two things. Thanks, Tyler. I've got a two-part answer on that, because one would be in the near future and one would be later on. I think for myself, it would be helping companies succeed or organizations succeed. You asked about leadership philosophy. And one of the things I believe is really a great hallmark of a leader is helping their employees become the best person that they can be, or help them develop into the next version of the employee, if you will, and help them reach their potential. And so I like doing that on more of a macro level with companies as well. I think that'd be a lot of fun, and it'd be fun to take on some very large company that's going through some challenging times and help them get back to their glory days, if you will, or help a small company grow into something quite large. So I think that'd be fun to do next. And then beyond that, maybe later on in life, I love tinkering with the old classic cars. I think it'd be a lot of fun to have a little restoration shop and restore old vintage cars. So I think that'd be fun as well.
That would be awesome. Do you have that one vehicle that you would always like, that one trophy vehicle that you'd want to restore?
Yeah. Yep. It's something really obscure. It's French. It's from the 60s. It's called a Fossil Vega Fossil 2. Just a big, long car, and a lot of famous people had them back in the 60s, but very low production numbers. So it's a challenging car to restore. There's a lot of raw materials in that vehicle, and a lot of hand-built parts. So it'd be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate having you on this episode. This was wonderful.
I appreciate you having me, Tyler, and look forward to hopefully seeing you again on a GrovTalk.
Yep. Have a
All
good
right,
one.
take care. Thanks, man.